Hey guys, welcome back to yet another episode of Get Corporate Ready. I am your host, Bohlale, Paile, and in this video, we're going to be unpacking a very critical part of being in an interview and going through an interview process. For most of you that follow me on my Instagram handle, you will know that recently I asked you guys to post all of your questions that you feel like I haven't covered as yet on my YouTube video. And now is the opportunity that I will actually be going through each of the questions that were posed to give you guys a little bit more comfort when you are preparing for your interviews. So make sure that you stay tuned to this week's video where I'll be speaking about how to beat nerves and anxiety when you are in an interview. One of the key questions I got recently from one of my followers is, Bohlale, how do I beat anxiety and nerves? I went to an interview this morning and I was shaking like a leaf. I couldn't speak. I was stuttering over my words and it was actually just embarrassing. How do I go about ensuring that I'm not nervous when I go for interviews? Then I asked a follow-up question to say, but were you prepared, right? Because for those of you that have been following, you'll know that preparation is absolutely key. And then she said, well, actually it's my fault. I didn't prepare the day before. I rushed an hour before to start preparing and I just felt unprepared. And I was like, well, therein lies your answer. So in this video, what I'm going to be tackling is just going through, once again, guys, the basics of when you get called for an interview. What are the 5 different steps that you just need to be cognizant of so that you don't arrive at the interview unprepared and therefore making a mess of your interview? So the first thing, guys, is that when you're applying for a particular role, please make sure that you have considered the places that you're applying for. Don't be the kind of person that just applies to absolutely everything that seems interesting and then hopes for the best. You need to ensure that you've got a proper strategy. You need to know what roles am I applying for, which companies am I applying for. So when you click to apply for a particular role, make sure you know the company that you're applying to and also make sure that you know the role and that it aligns with where it is that you're trying to go. Secondly, when you get a call from a recruiter and they say to you, we have shortlisted your application, we'd love to see you for an interview, that is the time where you start to make sure that you start planning. You diarize the date that they've given you. You ensure that according to your own work schedule, you can accommodate that time. You make sure you find out whether is it a virtual interview, is it an in-person interview. If it's in person, make sure you know exactly where the offices are, how far they are, and make sure that you accommodate that within your time schedule, right? So if you need to drive somewhere, make sure that you know, oh, it's 30 minutes away. My interview starts at 1 o'clock. Therefore, by 12:15, I need to be leaving to give myself a little bit of leeway because you don't want to arrive at the time that you're supposed to be starting. You always want to arrive 10 to 15 minutes before. So make sure you're diarizing the date. Make sure you know whether it's in person or virtual. And then make sure that you remember what role it is you applied to. Go back to the role, and if you don't have the job spec, ask them to send it to you so that you can start preparing. Now, thirdly, you know exactly when your interview is going to be and whether it's going to be in person and virtual. The very first thing you do is start doing an in-depth research of the company. Make sure that you go into Google so that it can redirect you to the company's website. And you also use LinkedIn to follow what are the current things that the company's been up to. Now, as you arrive on the website, make sure you understand the industry that the company is in. What is it that they pride themselves on? Make sure you understand what the culture and values are of the company and of the organization. Make sure you know what they do. You know, are they a local company? Are they an international company? Where is the footprint? Who are the directors? Who are the people that have been running the company? How long has the company been in existence? Make sure that you know all of that stuff, guys. And one thing that always helps me, I write down detail, right? I am not going to rely on my memory to say that I've read the whole website and therefore I'm going to remember. I write things down so that I understand key things about the organization. And that's just to make sure that you are prepared. If anyone asks you a question pertaining to the organization or pertaining to the leadership, you must have a sense, and you need to have at least researched some of that information for you to understand how to answer those questions. And then secondly, from a LinkedIn perspective, LinkedIn is really where you get a sense of the company in terms of what are the current things that they've been up to. What are they celebrating? What are some of the milestones? What are they saying about their people? What are the new initiatives that are coming up in that organization? So you use LinkedIn to understand current, you use a website to understand more detail around the organization. Once you've done an in-depth study around the organization, you must go back to the job spec, right? So the job spec gives you a sense of the role that you've applied to. What you do once you've got the job spec is that you go through all the detail in the job spec. What I want you to do is make sure that you've got one highlighter where you're going to highlight the things that you already know you've got exactly that type of experience. The other highlighter, you highlight the things that you know you still need to get more exposure to and you don't necessarily know how to do it end to end. The reason why you do this is because as they start asking you questions about your experience, about the role, it's important for you to know what are the key things that are your strengths that you know speak to the job that you've applied to, but also it's good for you to understand what are the things that you know you don't have that are on the job spec, but how are you going to speak to it if you are asked about it? So once you go through your highlighter that then looks at all the different things that you don't know as well, you then have to ask yourself, how can I upskill in this? What are the things that I'm going to say? If I'm asked about doing this, how am I going to then answer the question when they ask me about these things? So unpacking the role gives you a good sense as to whether you know 60% of the role, 70% of the role, 50% of the role, and the other 50 that you don't know. What are you going to say around the exposure and experience that you've had before that somewhat counts towards it? And what are some of the plans that you have in place to be able to upskill yourself in it? So when you go for a job application, guys, it's not always that you are going to know absolutely everything on your job spec. And if you get to a point where you're applying to something that you know absolutely everything, you must know that you're not going to grow, right? Because the role is not going to challenge you, right? So you need to be able to speak to the things that you don't have that are on the job spec, but then you need to be confident about the things that you do know, that then you can speak to as strengths from the job spec. And last but not least, guys, always practice the basic interview questions. Make sure you're coming back to my YouTube channel and practicing all the relevant questions that could come up. They won't always come up, but because you've practiced it, that's going to give you a better sense of what to say, how to go about answering, and you've at least applied your mind to it. Now, the trick to all of this preparation really, guys, is the fact that do this a day or two before your interview. Never wake up on the day and think, oh, my interview's at 2 o'clock, around 12, I'm going to start preparing, because you're going to feel overwhelmed. There's a lot of information to digest and there's a lot of preparation, right? You're not going to be able to go through all of my videos within an hour, right? So make sure that you've given yourself time 2 days before, start preparing, maybe start doing the research and start going through the job spec. The day before, start going through some of the practice interview questions that could come up in the interview. This, I promise you guys, is going to really set you up to come into your interview with confidence, and it's going to allow you to really shake off the nerves and the anxiety that come with not being prepared. So guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you found this valuable. And if you have and you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure that you clicking that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the videos that are still going to be posted on this channel that are really just going to help you get corporate ready.